Welcome to another episode of Carolyn Talks Television. I'm Carolyn Topol, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Rachel Arnett.
Hi, everyone.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about ratings and sweeps months and how much they seem to be impacting today versus what their impact used to be. If anybody is unaware, during the year, as particularly the Nielsen ratings, focus on ratings, and the sweeps months are November and May. So if you ever see a bump up in the excitement in your TV shows, or you remember seeing it.
The commercials start coming a little more rapidly. They're more exciting.
You know, shows are reaching that, ready for the holiday hiatus or ready for the summer hiatus. You would see that November and May. And that was considered a big coup, ultimately, for later getting ads on your show.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Nielsen ratings are those packets that get sent to homes, right?
Packets, and they used to even put equipment in homes, and you had to be like sworn to secrecy, and you had a diary. And
I get like $1 in the mail.
No, I don't think so. I don't think. No.
That was the tooth fairy. My apologies.
But they used to put Nielsen boxes in people's homes and would keep them there for just a period of time because they had to keep shifting, so there would never be like only one person's view. And at any one time, you would have a representative cross-section of the country with these boxes. And that was from years back. And since then, I don't know that they could still even need to do the boxes because of all the times in the digital stage now in the world. Yeah. But the Nielsen ratings are still significant. But the big difference is, are they really as significant as they used to be, particularly focusing on certain months or certain weeks of the year when you know there was used to be that bump was really important for advertisers and really important to keep that show alive.
Yeah. And so if I'm understanding correctly, the Nielsen ratings, when they would put that, it's to see kind of what the TV watching patterns of certain demographic groups and the population as a whole are.
And the quantity, the representative quantity. So were 40% of these people all watching the same show? For example, one of the highest rated shows of all single shows of all time was the final episode of MASH.
Yes. Yep.
And it got huge ratings. Its percentages were, so big, nobody could even believe it for one specific show, to the point that I remember where I was when I watched it. I was in college. And I remember who I was with, and there were parties for watching MASH, that final episode. It was a movie-length final episode, and that there was a blackout. It was actually atop of the news the next day. There had been a blackout in, I believe, a city or a town in Arizona, and they were going to show it again in that area because there was like outrage because they were missing the final episode of MASH. Because back then was before DVR, before TiVo, and even just before VCRs were in homes.
Well, and that all strikes me as really interesting because I think of one of the biggest cultural phenomenon right now as we're taping the show, so a month later for you guys, and that's the Game of Thrones series finale.
Yes.
And the HBO format, there are no commercials during the show.
Right.
But there's a lot of web traffic. There are commercials immediately preceding and following the show. But I wonder how, with an HBO format, things like that impact because they don't have the commercials in between.
I would imagine it has to do with truly selling HBO. Literally.
I know HBO is a little concerned right now because something like 65% of its recent users say that they're going to cancel after Game of Thrones is over because that's the reason that they have HBO.
And I hear them. I understand that. That used to be a lot of times what people did with the HBO and Showtime.
Oh, absolutely. You purchase it for that.
For whatever show you were watching.
Absolutely.
And when it ended, it ended. You ended it. because you just got your money back, which is one of the reasons that the cable providers are trying very hard to package things now.
Yes.
Everything comes in a package. So you can't really literally buy one, buy two, buy three premium services.
Premium channels.
You buy your premium channels, and then you buy your phone service, and you buy your internet service, and they bundle everything, but you're not really like picking one. It's not. It's no longer this Chinese menu, one from column A and one from column B, kind of an idea anymore. One of the things that I feel is really significant now is it used to be you knew in May everything would get exciting.
Yep.
The seasons were ending. You were about to go into summer hiatus, which used to be when you would see the repeats.
Yep.
So anything you missed, that's when you got to see it. Once
That's when
again,
you caught up.
pre-VCR.
Exactly.
You caught up.
Pre-VCR, pre-DVR.
Oh my goodness, we were out of town a week. What are we going to do? Okay, we got to make sure we're home on August 2nd because that's the repeat date for whatever episode you missed. But in May, they tied things up either with a ribbon or with a cliffhanger if it was a series that was ongoing, and that would be it. But this year, we're seeing a little bit different. Now, Game of Thrones is all in May.
Yes.
It's doing its May thing, and it's happening.
And it's magnificent.
And there's another one we're going to talk about later that's doing the big May finale, and I know we'll talk about this in the future, but I'm just consider that a teaser for the moment.
That's a teaser.
That's a teaser. That's a teaser. Okay, now teaser. But This Is Us finished another amazing season. One of the most popular shows across the board on any polls you do for TV favorites. It always seems to show up in the top 10. We've talked about it several times, but it didn't end in May this year. It ended its season in April.
Which would never have happened.
Oh no, they would have
previously.
really held that one. They would have put in repeats before they did that, or thrown in some special to preempt to get that season finale in May. And instead, I think they probably really hit the jackpot in ratings.
Absolutely.
Because the ratings nowadays also are impacted by DVR. If you use the equipment, my understanding, I am not a technician, so I'm qualifying all of this right at the moment, but my understanding from what I've done in a little bit of research is that if you DVR something, it means that the cable box, which is what you watch through, is registering that you're watching that show.
Yeah. Well, and I know that statistics are published continually on what shows that are watched, shows that are DVR'd, shows that are watched online. So all of this data is being collected through the cable services and through Hulu, Netflix, and other things like that are playing either alongside or after the fact. Like after a season is over, sometimes it'll end up on Netflix. Whereas Hulu sometimes, like Superstore on NBC, gets released the same, the next day. So it's
interesting
along.
how these streaming networks are really coming into play now. I mean, Netflix has a huge amount of movies and shows, and now what they're doing with the new thing that you could actually watch a feature film on Netflix 2 days after it's released in like 6 theaters, because that allows it to get an Oscar.
Yep. And Hulu is now doing live shows as well. They've got a live show coming up that I only know about because it's RuPaul's Drag Race related. But they're doing like a live performance that you purchase for $3. It's almost like pay-per-view through Hulu, which I like. The thought of pay-per-view and Hulu, mind-blowing, but they're kind of bringing back that model.
Which is incredible, and it's not necessarily only going to be in May.
Exactly, yep.
And people are responding. They wouldn't bother doing it, they wouldn't bother going for it if they didn't think there was the audience. And the audience for Hulu has grown exponentially. Netflix has linked itself with all these cable companies. So that's grown also exponentially. It's, someone once said to me, what do you DVR that you like? And I said, as much as I can fit in the DVR. I mean.
So much.
And you start to look at that and your DVR is filling, you're like, I better watch some TV, and you don't even, it's almost like I throw up my hands and I say, I don't even know what to watch, because then there's classics I like to see.
There are a few shows that I've felt like I gave up on just because there were like 10 episodes in the DVR. I was like, I just can't do it. I can't do it to myself. I can't. So there were some shows that, because I got so far behind, seeing them in the DVR actually, I was like, nah.
It's overwhelming.
It overwhelmed, so I stopped.
Some of the biggest shows in ratings this past year, one of them for me was a surprise, and some were not.
One of them was a big surprise for me.
Okay, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. Well, so the top 5 are, as far as telecasts, so top 5 single episodes, movies.
Right. And this was 2018.
Events.
We're talking about
2018,
2018, so we have a summary.
Super Bowl, of course. Super Bowl postgame, NFC Championship, NFC playoff. No big surprise there.
Right.
This Is Us was pretty surprising to me, but not terribly surprising.
It was number 5.
Yeah. The one that was a big surprise for me was actually number 9, Roseanne. And that kind of blows my mind, because one thing I will say is I don't know anyone really in my age group that watched that at all.
It was very, I think the people who watched the original were the ones who wanted to see the resurrection of Roseanne.
Well, you think about these shows that are being resurrected, Roseanne had a totally different reaction than Murphy Brown, which really didn't do that well when it was brought back.
And I was a Murphy Brown super fan.
Yeah.
When it first was out. So of course Murphy Brown brought back current times. They had the same cast, they had a new model that made it a current thing, but I watched it. And while I may or may not have agreed with the politics that it brought in, it was so clearly focused on relating to current events and how the team felt about the current state of politics. That the humor didn't make it. The humor ended up laying flat.
Well, I think that there's something to be said for when that show existed, there was nothing else like that. There was nothing else that was controversial like that, that talked about politics, that had the single mother.
Right.
And now kind of it created its own death, its own demise almost, because once it was introduced, once Murphy Brown was there, then other shows with strong female leads flourished. And so it wasn't novel anymore. So I don't think it was really able to successfully capture a new audience, because a lot of what made it special in the first place, it gave birth to in so many formats that it wasn't a vacuum anymore.
And that is one show that suffered from ratings. Which network shows are the ones that probably are the most susceptible? If you start out and you have a 20 to 35% rating on your first episode, and by your third episode you're at 10, and maybe even less, and it's dwindling rapidly, then you know you haven't met the public, and that's when ratings really come into play, because the network shows need the ads, and the ads don't want to spend the money in a show that's not being watched.
But I think it's also fascinating now that we look at TV ratings and TV viewership, but there's an entirely new metric that's now really being considered, which is Twitter interaction, especially. I know I have friends who work for a national television station, and a huge part of their marketing work is social media marketing. And their shows have to get a certain number of retweets for them to receive this advertising. Advertisers look at that as kind of a measurement now of customer and client engagement. So they look and they say, well, only 150,000 people, or there were only 150,000 tweets about this. Game of Thrones, you're looking at 3 billion, I'm making these numbers up, 300 million tweets about it. And that information very often works alongside ratings now, as far as
I would imagine,
advertisers considering it.
Absolutely. One of the things I've noticed is stars, writers, people who are the names that are involved in televising certain shows will promote that they are going to live tweet while an episode airs, which is when they're getting the true measure of not who is watching either today or eventually, like the DVR model, but who's watching right then and there, and is so into it that they're going to even have their computer or their phone with them and live tweet because it's exciting to engage with the stars while watching.
Yeah. Well, in some shows it's subtle, it shows up on the bottom, but some shows are not. They're like, hashtag, I talk about RuPaul's Drag Race a lot, but RuPaul will literally, as part of challenges, suggest hashtags because this piece is so important. So hashtag Snatch Game at Sea, hashtag RuPaul's Best Friends Race, whatever it may be. And that piece engages people, like you said, it's that immediate engagement. The networks get feedback right away as to how many people are watching, whether they're very passionate about it, whether they hate the episode, and they're getting all of this real time as it's shown, which is very different than some of the, the paper formats of the Nielsen ratings.
And some of you, or all of you probably know by now how much I'm into Hallmark mysteries.
Yes.
I'm the mystery person. I enjoy the Hallmark fluffies, but I'm very much into the Hallmark mysteries. And lately what they've been doing is at the beginning of each mystery, one or two of the stars will come on and say, live tweet with us at so-and-so and so-and-so, and we'll be there and we're going to answer your questions and we'll see if we can figure this out together, the mystery. And you're, wow, I rarely do that because I DVR most of my shows at this point.
Yep.
But if I was up and watching, I would definitely want to interact with the stars and see how they toy with us in Twitter land. And it's fun. It's almost like you're getting to sit with the stars of the show while the show airs. The other flip side of that is what a show like This Is Us has started doing. They say at the end of their episode, so if you watch This Is Us as it airs, they say, now join us at such and such, and they give you a web address, and there's a sit-down chit-chat that you can watch on the web of those people who were featured in that episode, and they talk about the episode that had just aired. You can't do that on TV. They don't do it on TV.
They do it online.
They do it online only, but they advertise it at the end of the program. Join This Is Us, and you see who's at the table.
Yeah.
And it's usually the people featured in that episode. And they say, join A, B, and C as we discuss today's episode.
Well, and I just think, the TV landscape, like we were talking about with digital platforms and everything, it's shifted so much kind of our understanding of what is a successful show versus a not successful show. Because I think of even Family Guy, which now is a very well-known show. But after its first season on Fox, it was canceled. And a lot of people don't remember that the show was canceled, but there was such uproar from fans that it ended up being brought back. And there are active campaigns on social media now to bring back shows. I think of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine has had an unbelievable...
Then because there was this massive fan uprising on Twitter especially, bring back B99 or bring back Brooklyn or whatever the hashtag was, that went trending, and before you know it, it's picked up by NBC.
And it took a real trip because it went first to the streaming places.
Yep.
And then it came back to network. And I was like, are you kidding me?
And
I was shocked.
Mindy Project did the same thing. Mindy Project ended its run on Hulu.
And very few shows historically have been able to do that. One of those shows, which is one of the most famous stories of this show, is Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers was canceled or was doomed to be canceled. And instead, you had Cheers with probably one of the worst ratings in its first season as it could be. And then it had such a strong core fan base. And it was letter writing. That's what it was. Letter writing, phone call campaigns.
Letters. What are letters?
On pieces of paper and everything with envelopes and stamps.
Oh my gosh.
And phone calls, probably with phones that, not with dials, but had push buttons.
No.
Push buttons.
Not
Wasn't quite that, but
phones.
no rotary phones, I would imagine.
The old school, like, connect to the operator.
No, we weren't watching.
Give me NBC on the double.
But they definitely came back, and wow, when they came back, they knew how to do it.
Yeah.
It became an enigma.
Yeah. Well, and I also, so maybe for me, it brings up kind of a potential flaw with the rating system as it relates now, because I think of my age group and younger, I think of my students, and almost none of them are watching TV, period. So Nielsen ratings that capture live TV data and DVR data aren't even touching really my age group and below.
Right.
Certainly cartoons that does. But so many of my peer group and students are watching Netflix or Hulu exclusively or streaming online, that the traditional rating system really doesn't tell the whole tale. So I think that's why sometimes you have shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which was such a hugely popular show, but it never showed in the ratings because nobody was, not nobody, but a large percentage of its viewership was not watching on TV or on DVR.
Right.
They were watching after the fact, or they were watching it on NBC or Fox.com. So I think TV networks and streaming networks have had to kind of adjust the way they evaluate whether shows continue or not.
And some of the interesting things, just to give you a little flavor of what shows are getting attention from the usual avenue of ratings. If you have a regularly scheduled, this is network television now, some of the top 10 regular series, I'm going to just read them off to you here. We have them on a list right on our happy little computer here.
And I'm going to say surprise or no or yes.
Right.
I'll react.
I'm going to do a thumbs up, or I'm going to play the old Ebert thing,
exactly.
game.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right. Interestingly enough, Roseanne was one.
Still surprised.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how the Connors do.
I'm wondering if the Connors' longevity is questionable.
Yeah, because the show was called Roseanne. It was about Roseanne.
Anyway, and then Sunday Night Football, not a surprise.
No, not at all.
Big Bang Theory, that should be number one. Just saying.
Not a surprise. Not a surprise at all.
NCIS.
Which, at this point, the show's been on for a long time, so that's pretty phenomenal. They've got a very loyal fan base.
They do have a very loyal fan base, and interestingly enough, one of the things I noticed was none of the Law and Orders were on this list.
Yeah.
NCIS is, Law and Orders not so much, and yet that show I think has been on. People are going to have their grandchildren. That same show's going to be on. It almost is going to have the same cast. It feels like. This Is Us, no surprise. Young Sheldon. I
can't explain it.
I think that's because, first of all, I think the writing has improved.
Okay, good.
I started watching a little bit, probably for the same reason that these ratings went up, because it was right after the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. So it followed up. That was.
I left the TV on. That's really what happened. The TV stayed on.
Well, networks will sometimes pair struggling shows with shows that are doing really well for that reason.
Yep, it's the TV version of Coattails in politics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Truly. Manifest, I have mixed feelings about that for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because I think the show had a lot of potential. I also don't think a lot of people that I know were watching it, but it seemed to be doing pretty well. I don't know.
I think it went down a rabbit hole, personally.
Yeah.
I think
they lost track of the story.
Yeah. The Good Doctor.
Not surprising to me at all.
I love it.
Yeah.
America's Got Talent, not a big surprise. I'm surprised more of those shows aren't up. And Bull on CBS, which kind of surprises me, but I just don't watch it, so I don't know.
Well, and Bull for me is a show like NCIS, and granted the star was on NCIS.
Right, okay.
So he's got that fan base built in. But it's another procedural. It's another, how it's, you know that it's going to end generally pretty well, so it's that escapist. I don't know. When you compare it to other shows that I think are better, and it's not, not that it's a bad show, but I just think there are shows that are more creative and funnier and better.
Now, for the networks, I will say May is going to still be a biggie.
Oh, absolutely.
You have America's Got Talent, I believe, is finishing up their finales. The Voice is finishing up its finales. These are live shows now. People watch. Not only do they watch, they interact. They're asked to vote. And on top of everything else, it's ending in May. So this is where the networks are saying, okay, we're giving it to you. Please do something. And I think one of the biggest gifts they're doing to viewers for themselves. I mean, gifts.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest self-serving gifts they're doing is the finale of the entire series of The Big Bang Theory is this coming week, from when we're taping right now. So I'm not pretending I don't know what's happening. I am a Big Bang Theory addict. I love the show. I followed it pretty close to from the beginning. What I didn't follow, I watched and caught up with. And I'll say, that night in May, I have a funny feeling that show this coming Thursday night is going to be very widely watched. And on top of that, very wisely, CBS teased that Young Sheldon, which follows it, is going to have a surprise for Big Bang Theory fans on that episode.
The introduction of a character from Big Bang Theory.
I was wondering, is this when Young Sheldon's going to meet one of the guys that he's ultimately buddies with on the show? Or I don't know. Are we going to flip back and forth?
Amy, he'll run into.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great. But I wonder if they're going to bring on one of those characters, or if instead, because I think they more got to know each other on the show, but maybe run into somebody, or are we going to start seeing Jim Parsons as opposed to just having a voiceover when he introduces certain parts of the show as the grown-up Sheldon talking about his past as young Sheldon? So will that be suddenly Jim Parsons' new gig is now Young Sheldon? So there's a lot to happen in May. I do think May sweeps in some ways seem stronger. And I also think the shows that like to focus on sweeps more in many ways are the daytime shows.
Absolutely.
And the game shows. They have a lot of special events. Jeopardy does tournaments in November and in May frequently.
Right now is Teachers Tournament.
Teachers Tournament is happening right now in May.
Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune are doing like Educators Teachers Week.
You know, so and it's school's still in session, so it's not like they're summer vacation or something. And the daytime soap operas try to reach pinnacles of storylines now. 3
memory loss concussions, all in the same episode. 14 twins are discovered.
No.
Just a series of catastrophes.
Or people coming back from the dead. They're all going to come back from the dead this month, and it's not the show The Walking Dead.
It's like a lot of zombies, but like fully functional ones.
Fully functional ones that don't eat brains, other people's brains. But it'll be interesting to see where the shows go, how this month winds up. And, you know, when you look at the top shows as a whole, so many of them are streaming and not necessarily in May and November. It'll be interesting to see where primetime style of programming goes in the future when it comes to ratings, and how the networks are going to compete with the streaming. So for this episode, Rachel and I had a great time talking about a whole bunch of shows we love.
So many.
And we hope to see you again next month on Carolyn Talks Television. Bye-bye. Bye.